Okay. Okay, we'll be starting here shortly. We're going to wait for just a few minutes while we allow a few more attendees to come in and a couple more panelists that are coming in. And we'll be starting in about 5 to 7 minutes tops. In the interim, some housekeeping items for those who are panelists. Microphones off, please. Cameras can be on if you need them to be on. We will be sharing a screen from our side that have all the slides on there. Panelists, attendees will be able to raise their hand and ask questions during the Q&A session. So if you have questions prior to that, please put them in the chat and we will hold those until we have the presentation complete. So we are about 5 minutes away from getting started here. I see Mike Rogers has come in as a panelist. Mike, would you do me a favor and test your microphone for me, please?
Testing.
There we go, Michael. Thank you so much.
Okay.
And Mike Thornhill, I see you've come in as well. Mike, would you please test your microphone for me?
Can you hear me?
I sure can. Thank you.
Great.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay, so just bear with us for just a second as we get others to jump on to the webinar. We are live streaming this on Facebook, on Laredo Water, and on the City of Laredo's Facebook page. We should be, like I said, started in about 5 minutes, and then we'll get some introductions made and some housekeeping items, and then we'll proceed with the virtual town hall. Again, thank you for joining us this evening. Those of you that are watching on Facebook, we'll be starting here shortly. Please go to laredowater.org and register to be part of the webinar, to be able to ask some questions through the webinar chat. And also, if you wanted to speak, you can we can open the microphone for you and bring you up to ask questions during the Q&A. So, okay, so just bear with us for just a second as we finish getting our folks to come in, allow some additional attendees who have registered to come in, and then we'll get started here. Russ, I see you jump back on. Russ, can you check your mic for me, please? Russ, test your mic for me, please.
Hello.
There we go, Russ. I got it. Heard it. Okay, those that are watching on Facebook, we're about 3 minutes away from getting started. Attendees are continuing to come in. I see that we've been joined by a few more and others are still coming in. Again, if you are watching on Facebook Live on laredowater.org or on the city's Facebook feed, you can go to laredowater.org and register to attend the webinar, ask questions through the chat. And I see that we do have some panelists who are already waving hello or saying hello in the chat there. So thank you for joining us, Mr. Gonzalez. Um, and I know we do have a few others that have joined us. We had quite a few register, and so we'll give them a few minutes more to jump in. Everyone should have gotten a reminder a day ago, and then another one an hour ago, and so we're hoping to have a good showing tonight of residents who are jumping in to see Laredo's 50-year master plan as it's being developed. Assistant City Manager Riazul Mia, we're going to get started in about a minute, if that's okay, or shall I wait just a little longer?
Oh, I say go ahead and start.
Okay.
We don't want to have people wait.
Very good. So about another minute, and then we'll go ahead and open it up and begin the presentations from the teams that are presenting their portions of the water and wastewater master plan. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. For those of you that are watching us on Facebook, either on the Laredo Water feed or the City of Laredo's feed, and those who are registered and in attendance to today's virtual town hall for the Laredo Water 50-year master plan, and this encompasses both water and wastewater. This is the second in the series of virtual town halls that we're having. There'll be one more on April 28th. We had one prior April 14th. And so again, thank you for registering and for joining us tonight. I know that this is an important topic for the community and for our city council, who back in March of last year began this project by selecting an engineering firm to head up the water master plan, Lockwood, Andrews, and Unum. And then later this year, in January, selecting Ardura to head up the wastewater master plan. And so at this time, what I'd like to do is just introduce a few of the council members who might be in attendance. I know we had a couple sign up, but their schedules have been running very, very heavy this week. And I don't see any of them have logged in yet. So I'd like to introduce the city management that has joined us. Assistant City Manager Riazul Mia, would you like to say a few words to our panelists and our attendees?
Yes, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. This is a major important project which is council directed us to come up with a master plan for next 50 year, which is literally the next 50 years of future of Laredo, how we develop, how we provide water. As everybody know, water is life. And so with that, we basically hired the two best team in this country to come up with a plan. And we ask your recommendation, your comments to make it better. And thank you again for your time to joining us.
Thank you, Ria. And two very important gentlemen who have joined us are part of the city staff, and I'll let Arturo Garcia, who is heading up utilities, introduce his assistant director as well, Michael Rogers, and let them say a few words about the importance of this project for the city of Laredo and its ratepayers.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. And hello to everybody. Good afternoon. And this is a critical project for everyone here in Laredo. This is your master plan. It is, we need your input. It provides a foundation and provides the direction that the city will go for the next 50 years. So take heart of this master plan. I want to thank the consultants, their efforts, and the staff that has been working, and not only on this master plan, but the work that's ongoing outside. And as many of you see, all the stuff that's happening, we need to support this master plan, and we need to support our staff and our customers. Our customers are key in this master plan. Thank you very much. And also here with us is Mr. Michael Rogers. I'll let him say a few words.
Yes, I want to say thank you for attending this, and it's always good to hear your comments. A lot of times we get too close to some problems. We need to hear from our customers. So thanks for taking the time to join us.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Arturo. As I said earlier, there were 2 teams that were selected. Lockwood Anders and Newnham was selected last year, so they've been at it for a little while. They are running the water master plan side, and I'll let Tom Ray introduce the members of his team over at Lockwood Anders and Newnham. Tom?
All right. Thank you. Yes, on our team is Charles Shoemate, who you'll be hearing from in just a moment. Lisa Latu, who is also on the team and also a speaker later on in the presentation. And last but not least is Russ Ford. And they're the pictures of our key group. Anyway, there are more folks working on this Laredo Water Master Plan than are shown on the pictures, but these are the key individuals. These are the folks that will be presenting tonight and answering your questions. Thanks, Gene.
I also know that you have Mike Thornhill, who is part of your team here tonight. And so I know we'll be hearing from him later this evening as well. On the wastewater side, starting this year, a little after the water side, is Ardura, and they're led by Chris Canonico and his team. And I'll let Chris introduce the members of his squad.
Yeah, thanks, Gene. So our team is proud to get started and move along the wastewater side. Again, we have 3 Laredoans running the project with Dan Landecker, Hector Pena, and Ignacio Hinojosa. And you'll hear from Hector and Ignacio today. Excited to lay this out and love the feedback we can get going through this. So thanks again, everybody, and looking forward to it.
Thank you, Chris. A few housekeeping items that we want to cover real quick. Again, we are streaming this live on Facebook, and you can go to laredowater.org and register to be a part of the webinar. And there's still time for you to get into there. And if you can't make today's, go in and register for next week's, Wednesday the 28th. We'll have another virtual town hall as well. Question and answer series will follow after the presentations are complete. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat beforehand, or you can wait till presentations are complete, and in the Q&A, raise your hand and we'll open the microphone for you so that you can make comment or ask questions. Okay, we're also monitoring the chats on Facebook, or the feeds on Facebook on Laredo Water and the City of Laredo. And so some questions do come in from the audience, from the general audience. We'll bring those into this as well. So again, the City Council took the extraordinary step to hire Lockwood Anders and Newnham and Ardura to review previous master plans, review current situations, and then prepare something for a 50-year future. And so what I'd like to do right now is introduce Charles Shoemate, who is with Lockwood Anders and Newnham. He is going to be leading you through the presentation on the water master plan and its work today. Charles, it's all yours.
Good evening. Let's go ahead and jump to the next slide. And if you're not familiar with the master planning process, each of the speakers tonight is going to talk about some major components of a master plan. My specific area is about the hydraulic modeling effort. And again, each of the speakers will talk about, their task, kind of status and progress to date and direction they're headed. So next slide. So goals of a master plan, it's really about planning for future growth. It also has some attention or focus on current needs and potential projects, but it's really looking forward over a 50-year planning horizon. Of course, we're, always attentive to, build on previous work and coordinate our efforts with city staff who know the system and potential projects best. We want to look at all aspects or all facets of the system and supply and identify vulnerabilities and look at what happens with potential emergencies or outages. Of course, any potential project come with costs associated with them, and we have to look at the financing, how you fund those things and the potential impacts. And then want to end up with a plan that really represents the community and needs of Laredo, and work with the people to make sure that we address all of those things. Next slide. So a little bit of background, Laredo has a long history, and the water system starts almost 140 years ago now. Almost exclusively the water used comes from the Rio Grande River. Groundwater or water from wells gets pretty limited use, both due to its limited quantity and quality. Some of that previous effort I mentioned that we're building on is the previous master plan work was done in 2011. Now there was a major update of that effort in 2015. And finally, it may have been mentioned already, but the Texas Water Development Board has a statewide plan, and the regions, there are regional planning areas that follow major watersheds in the state primarily, and Laredo is in Region M. And so we are looking to those Water Development Board projections of future population and water demand to guide a lot of this planning effort. So next slide. So just at a very high level here, a very simplified view of kind of the primary parts of any water system. You've got your source or supply, either surface water or groundwater. You go through some treatment and disinfection out into the system where there may be additional pumps or booster pump stations and additional storage out in the system before it arrives at your homes and businesses. Next slide. So today in the city of Laredo, and these have changed in recent years because of the bringing into the system, beginning operation of a second surface water treatment plant. So that's the top left aerial photograph there of the El Pico treatment plant that was placed in service in the last few years. There are currently 8 booster stations. That number again is changing because with the introduction of additional treatment capacity, the city is able to take out of current service some old booster pump stations and supply those areas directly with treated surface water. There are 9 elevated tanks in the system. Those 2 surface water treatment plants and 8 booster pump stations give you 10 service areas, and a part of the way that those are defined is through some pressure reducing valves in the system and isolation valves just to control boundaries on some of those service areas. And then finally, there are more than 1,000 miles of water line in the system, from small 2-inch lines all the way up to large 60-inch transmission mains. And next slide. So, where I'm most involved in the master planning effort is with the hydraulic modeling aspect of things. So a hydraulic model really is a computer simulation or representation of the water system. It looks at or incorporates both those things above ground that you see. So some of those storage tanks or pump stations, as well as all that underground piping that you don't see. It's a tool that allows us to kind of play what if, look at different interruptions potentially or disruptions to supply or pumping in the system, as well as to address where those may be short and more may be needed. It allows you to virtually test those improvements. Again, just more of the kind of the what ifing process, and you can identify multiple alternatives that you can then compete. Which based on some priority and way of ranking those things comes out on top. And of course, cost is always a consideration in those things, but you can look at placing storage at different locations in the system where it may be needed. The model helps you size and determine how much storage may be needed. Same applies to pumps and water lines when you're trying to connect sources of supply to especially growing areas of the system and where there will be new demand in the future, and then to test operational changes. Finally, have to address with all those potential improvements, the costs and how those things measure up when you look at their costs and benefits. And it's all about, being as prepared as we can be today for what the system needs to be able to deliver in the future. So next slide. So a little bit of, where we started and where we've been. So as I mentioned or touched on, where we began work was an update of some work performed in 2015. It's taken some fairly significant updates in some areas just because there's been a lot of growth. So there's a lot of new customers with their demands, a lot of new pipe added to the model. And of course, in that 5 to 6 year period, the cities had to address some pumps and added new pumps or increased pump capacity in a few areas. A really important step in the modeling process is simply verifying that model, comparing it against SCADA data stored about system operation to make sure that the model results actually match what you see in the system. And that looks primarily at large flows in the system from the treatment plants and booster stations, looking at tank levels throughout the system, and then pressures out in the distribution area. And a big key to getting those things to match a lot of times is simply pump controls, knowing which pumps are running and when they come on and turn off in response to what other events are happening in the system. A lot of what we've seen now are you take then and you apply that verified model to the existing system first, and then looking out at future conditions. And of course, what we see is things that staff talk with us about. It's growth and challenges in South Laredo with demand, refilling storage that's out in the system. And want to look too at where we may be able to improve efficiency of operation. And at times we're able to find ways of operating that simplify things for the operators and make them more effective across the system that they have to maintain. And finally, again, you just want to conclude with identifying those efficient and affordable improvements. Next slide. So in the end, when we finished our modeling work, that report's going to document the development of that model. It's going to talk about those existing needs in terms of capacity and pressure, and capacity there is a pretty broad term that can be everything from supply capacity to treatment capacity to storage capacity to pump and other conveyance or water line capacity out in the system. It's going to identify those capital improvements, both short term and long term. So the approach is to look at 10-year increments or intervals over that 50-year planning horizon, and to develop planning level costs for each of those projects, so that the financial planners can look at those numbers. They may have us reprioritize some things, but get those scheduled out in future years for city staff to go and then and implement. And then so that plan needs to be dynamic and updatable and actionable. They need to be able to work with the projects described there and go out and implement those. So next slide. Little highlight, some preliminary findings. The big one that stands out is the need long-term for, we've referred to it as an outer loop. So it's an extension of transmission mains that have already, the early or first segments of them have already been placed and are in service from the El Pico treatment plant. So it continues to extend that El Pico plant supply to other areas of the system, through large transmission lines running around the east side of the city and eventually all the way to South Laredo. Looking at some other water plant improvements potentially that help ensure, increase that level of service or the pressures out in the system. Starting at the treatment plants and booster pump stations, just making sure there are no obstacles, no impediments to delivering water at the pressure that's needed. And then pump station improvements, a lot of this in my mind is operational. It's making sure that there are controls in place. Some of that's physical, some of that may be, SCADA and programming, automating some things and, to make sure that water is delivered in the quantities necessary at booster pump stations to then send it out to customers in the system. And next slide. This is where I hand it back to Tom, who's going to talk about population water demands and a number of supply alternatives that the team is looking at.
All right, Charles, thank you very much. I'm Tom Ray. I appreciate all of you being here. As Arturo said, your attendance is appreciated. Your input is needed. And hopefully we'll be able to answer all your questions later on in this presentation. I need to start with recognizing an oversight I made and not recognizing Tom Mounts. He is a key part of our team. He's very familiar and done a number of projects here in the Laredo area. Tom is going to help me as we talk through a couple of things, population and water demands, as well as what are the alternatives out there for meeting our future needs in Laredo for water supply. So next slide. We have some information that we followed that we used in identifying how much water is needed and where it's needed, that type of thing. Key among those is one we've mentioned earlier. That's the Region M water supply plan. The assistant city manager serves on that planning group and has had significant input. So the city of Laredo is very well represented on Region M, and the output, the population projections and water demands are very reliable as a result of that type of input. We also have a number of water supply sources that have been looked at over the years for Laredo. And so we have those reports, we've looked at those. The projected water demands, we pull those out of Region M, but they help us identify two things. And we'll be trying to clarify these later on as well, but setting the supplemental water supply goal and the emergency water supply goal. The supplemental is the amount of additional water supply the city of Laredo will need to meet its future growth. And we'll show in just a minute that Laredo is growing significantly. So that's an important component. That future supply to meet growth is the supplemental supply goal. On the other, the emergency supply goal, this is a amount of water supply that we've identified that could get the city by should there be an outage of the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande source of water for Laredo is its primary source, as we mentioned earlier. If that were to be interrupted for some amount of time, what sources are available to help during that condition? And that's the emergency water supply goal, which we'll define and show you in just a minute. We have identified a number of alternatives to help meet both of these supply goals, and we're going to run through those with you right now. Next slide. Mentioned population. Here is an excellent graphic that Gene and his team put together to show the dynamic growth of Laredo over time. Starting here in 2020, just over 300,000 people and growing, doubling that size to significantly over 600,000 people by the year 2070. Next slide. To show what that growth means in terms of the amount of water supply needed to provide for the growth, that's what is shown on this table. Is taken out of that Region M plan. It's pretty busy, but I think we can walk through it and kind of show you exactly where we are today and where we need to be by the year 2070. Right now, the current water demand for the city of Laredo, that is that top line. There we go. 42,000 acre feet Actually, if you add in the Webb County irrigation and the other, the mining demands, it comes out to 43,851 acre feet per year. And we're gonna explain to you how much water that is. That is a just literally like it sounds. It's 1 foot of water over an acre. So that's what we use on the water supply side to quantify large amounts of water that are needed for water supply. So that's 43,800 acre feet. That is the current demand. Now, the supply that the city currently has available to match that is about 62,000 acre feet. So the city of Laredo has done an excellent job of looking out for your water supply and storing up and having available today a very sufficient supply, not only to meet today's demand, but demands on out into the future. And if you look at this bottom line, the black row there, you see there's a 18,000 acre foot surplus. That's about 30% that the city of Laredo has today to meet future growth needs over time. And as the city grows, that amount of surplus is going to steadily decline until you reach the year 2040. Just after the year 2040, additional water is going to be needed just to meet the growth of the city of Laredo. That is what we've targeted as our supplemental water supply goal. And you see if in the year 2070, there's a need for another 21,000 acre feet of water. That's the supplemental supply goal. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. Next slide, please. This is a graphic that shows what I'm talking about better than I can talk about it, but it shows where we are today and having the city's surplus amount of 18,000 acre feet. Over time, over the next 20 years, that's going to be used by the growth in the city. And just after the year 2040, we reach zero. So that point, the city will need to have online supplemental supplies to last out to 2070. That's another 20,000, 21,000 acre feet. Next slide. Again, just to emphasize the two supply goals that we're looking at, the emergency water supply goal in case of an interruption of the Rio Grande supply, and the supplemental supply goal that we just looked at on that graph, that 22,000 acre feet that's needed to meet future demands on all the way out to the year 2070. Next slide. All right, you've probably been confused enough about what an acre foot looks like or what it is, but this slide that Gene and his team put together is excellent. Over here on the right, it shows you that 1 acre foot of water is 326,000 gallons. So it's a large amount of water, 1 foot over 1 acre of area. So the current supply, again, that's 61,800 of those acre feet that's available today, that's going to last the city out to 2040 based on Region M projections. So Laredo is preparing for and has prepared for future growth. And now this water master plan is going to look at water supplies, not only for the long-term future, but also for any sort of emergency outage that could happen on the Rio Grande. All right, next slide, please. Again, this is showing that our targets and actually putting numbers on those, because in a few minutes, we'll look at the different alternatives. And the test will be, will that water supply alternative meet, 1, the supplemental water supply goal, and 2, the emergency water supply goal. The supplemental, again, 22,000 acre feet. If we take that to another unit, million gallons per day, that's used by city utilities and others when we talk about capacity of treatment and the need for treatment supply. It's usually referred to in million gallons per day. So 22,000 acre feet is 20 million gallons a day. The emergency water supply amount that we have identified, and we're going to verify this further with the city, with Arturo and his staff, is 37,500 acre feet, and that's 33.5 MGD to have available, again, if there's an emergency, an outage of the Rio Grande supply. Next slide. So what are our sources? What did we look at in terms of meeting these two different types of supply needs? And those are listed in the box on the right. We'll start with Lake Casablanca. We'll talk about a number of groundwater alternatives that we've looked at. Reuse, recycling, reclaimed water is a very valuable source, very readily available. So that is a key component of that. It's also been looked at thoroughly in the Region M plan. Another technique of stretching water supply, if you will, is to use aquifer storage and recovery. And I'll talk about that, try to explain that a little more. And the backbone of the Laredo water system continues to be the Rio Grande. And so there continues to be the need to identify additional water rights that could be obtained from the Rio Grande. Next slide. All right, this is where I would like Tom to jump in here. Tom has done a lot of work on Lake Casablanca, and he can go through the use of Lake Casablanca to potentially meet these supply needs. Tom?
Thank you, Tom. It's good to be here this evening. I want to talk just a few minutes about Lake Casablanca and the potential for its use for supplemental and emergency supply. It's always been looked at as a body of water immediately adjacent to the city. And so it has always been considered a potential source for additional water. With this study for the master plan, we re-looked at previous attempts to quantify the lake, and we prepared a memo about the capacities. It could be used as has been thought over the years for direct emergency supply. We found that though to be very, very limited. And it also has some potential for limited indirect reuse storage. When we talk in a few minutes, when Tom comes back and talks about reuse, some of that could be temporarily stored in the lake. There seems to be some capacity for that. A little bit of background, as many of you may know, the lake was built by Webb County back in the 1950s. It has an uncontrolled spillway. It's essentially a bowl, and it has to overtop to overflow. And it's only reached full capacity about 2 to 3 times, and that's only in the last 15 to 20 years as it overflowed and flowed down through Chacon Creek. The records from when it was built show that it's around 1,680 acres of surface area. And at that time, they estimated the full storage capacity of about 20,000 acre feet, which, as you saw in the slide just previously, might be able to supply supplemental for maybe a year, but not enough for the emergency supply for a year. But that's the entire lake. And at the time, it was a maximum of about 36 feet deep. Back in 2007, when I was working with Webb County to rehab the dam, we undertook some study of the lake, and we found at that time, based on the information we had, the surface area was a little bit smaller. We also estimated that the average volume of the lake was significantly less than the 20,000. We estimated at that time about 11,000 based on some soundings, and we found that the maximum depth at that time could only be 27 feet. So there's been approximately, even by 2007, which has now been 13 years ago, 14 years ago, there's been about 10 feet of sedimentation in the bottom of the lake. We used some additional new information and we're able to a little better quantify the potential, but we found that there's still maybe 15,000 acre feet of lake of storage capacity available in the lake if it were full to the fullest extent without overflow. And that's significantly less than the daily need or the emergency need that is coming. Even though the water is there, it's a very limited supply. And some of that capacity, that extra 5,000 acre feet, could potentially be restored through dredging. But dredging, there's several different ways to do it. None of them are inexpensive. And we have estimated that it would take on the average of about $6 to $8 per cubic yard to remove that sediment from the bottom of the lake. That equates to around $6 to $10 million to restore the full capacity. The other factor that we noticed was that the lake doesn't stay full all the time. It's filled by rainfall, runoff, and by groundwater, but it doesn't normally stay full. And that's because the evaporation from Lake Casablanca averages somewhere on the order of 60 inches a year, based on the Texas Water Development Board estimates. Rainfall estimates for the year are around 21 inches. So the natural water supply for Lake Casablanca is a 40-inch deficit. And so again, it points to the fact that yes, there's water there. Yes, it could be used, but it's very, very limited and has very little capacity to meet the needs of the growing city. With that, I'll turn it back to Tom.
All right, let's see. We may have a couple of more slides on Lake Casablanca. Yeah, this. Oh,
okay,
no.
Here we go.
No, I take that back. We've gone through the Casablanca slides and are now going to look at one of the groundwater supply alternatives, and that's in North Webb County. Initially, we have completed some initial evaluations. We put together a draft document. We'll be going over that with the city. But this supply source is generally in the northern Webb County area up close to Dimmitt County. The distance from Laredo is about 40 miles. As the crow flies, probably take about 47 miles of conveyance pipeline. Supplies are being estimated, and on the phone with us or joining us is Mike Thornhill, and Mike is our consultant with regard to groundwater. He's a groundwater hydrologist, has the Thornhill Group. I've worked with Mike for years. He's very familiar with these groundwater sources. So he has provided us information regarding what the potential supply from these North Webb County area could be. And it looks like about 25,000 acre feet per year. That does meet the supplemental supply goal. That's just over 22 million gallons a day. On the emergency supply, if we peak on the 25,000 acre feet, that and that means use 1.5 times more than's needed, then that would provide 33,750 acre feet per year. That is our emergency supply goal, or 33.5 MGD. Again, that's peaking, that's pumping 1.5 times more than you would every day on average for a year. And that would provide our the Webb County groundwater would provide our emergency supply goal for 243 days out of the year. So it would give the city a ample amount of time, a significant amount of time, to address emergency situations on the Rio Grande. Additional investigations would be needed, well tests, et cetera, to verify that. Next slide, please. Brackish groundwater is another one. Again, Mike Thornhill helped us with this one. And there have been a number of zones identified by the Texas Water Development Board and others of brackish supplies in Webb County. The distance varies, the cost is high, the water quality is slightly saline to moderately saline. Treatment would be required. The value of this brackish supply is that it is in close proximity to the city's water system. However, the downside is it doesn't meet the goals. It's limited quality and has limited quantity as well. And so it's not sufficient to meet either of the goals. All right. Mike, did you have anything to say on either one of those? I don't want to.
Again, I apologize. I'm still out in Wink and I'm not much to look at anyway, so I'll just leave the camera off. But with the northern Webb County Carrizo, the preliminary indications are that it's pretty good quality, but I mean, TDS in the 800 plus range, and there's more Carrizo below it that would be probably slightly above 1,000. So there could be some strategies there for blending and whatever in terms of for the longer term. And you hit it on the head. The ASR option or the brackish options are either shallow where they don't produce enough, or they're too far away to be to really be included in the mix.
Yep. One thing we need to clarify is when we say brackish, we're talking about salty water, essentially the way to look at it. So it's trying to get out the dissolved minerals in the drinking water that cause taste problems, being salty where it just simply is not usable for drinking water. All right, let's move on to the next slide. And another report was done that we relied on, very thorough report looking at what is called ASR, Aquifer Storage and Recovery. This is a technique that has been used, it's come into vogue probably 30 or more years ago, but where it's applicable, where you can do it, what it allows you to do is take a portion of your treated water from your water treatment plant and store that essentially in an underground aquifer. And then during the heavy use times of the year, during the summertime typically, it would be in that underground storage and you could pull it out and use it during those periods of time. What was found by the technical report in 1996 was that the aquifers in the city area are shallow, and importantly, when you inject it, and when you inject the treated water, the recovery rates provide low production. So you get into a situation where it's going to be more costly than the production that's going to be made available from the storage. Also importantly, the Region M group took a look, but there are no recommendations in the current Region M plan for aquifer storage and recovery. All right, next slide, please. Mike can help me with this one too a little bit, because we're going to talk about imported groundwater. These are supplies that are outside of the Webb County area, moving up into Dimmitt County, all the way up to Val Verde and Kinney County. And here's an excellent map that Mike and his group put together to show where these supplies are located. The arrows there give you an idea of the direct distances from those supplies to the city's system. And the details are the different aquifers that are underlying these counties. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right. Keeping that graphic in mind, that map in mind, if we look at Dimmitt County, adjacent to Webb County, it has a significant supply source, 40 million gallons a day. It's 70 miles from the city system. The water quality is good. No blending would be required. If you move a significant distance, you double the distance to the Kinney County area, there's about 22 million gallons a day of fresh groundwater available, but it's also adjacent to Val Verde County. So Mike Thornhill is advising us, if you look at Kinney County, you would probably want to look at Val Verde in conjunction with that, combine those, if you will, and you have a very significant supply, because the Val Verde groundwater supply is 40 to 90 million gallons a day on its own. The downside, that's 150 miles away, but it is fresh groundwater, no blending would be required. Mike, any comments on imported groundwater? Any points I missed?
I don't, certainly any issues with groundwater conservation districts would need to be addressed, and the joint planning process of what are called groundwater management areas would need to be addressed in terms of availability of water. Just also wanted to point out, as we did last time, that the Carrizo is a vast storage reservoir, and because of the way it works, is very, very resilient and does not respond drastically to drought. We call it drought resistant or drought tolerant. And so it's a great resource even during drought. And of course the Edwards Trinity up, excuse me, in Del Rio or Val Verde County and in Kinney County just has a lot of water. It has a lot of water. There are issues that would need to be worked out with respect to impacts on San Felipe Springs and some other things, even though the models show that even with the production rates that have been presented here, the springs would still flow more than their historic low. So all that's been considered, but all those things would need to be, would go in the mix.
Right. And let's see the next slide, please. Well, let me go back one. I want to make one final point on all three of these imported groundwater supplies would meet both the emergency supply goal as well as the supplemental goal. In fact, it works into the economics that there's so much groundwater there, so much supply, that it gets expensive to deliver just the portion needed for Laredo's supplemental or emergency supply, but they do meet those goals. Okay, next slide, please. This is to talk about that reuse project, reclaimed water project. It's identified in the Region M plan. The assistant city manager of Laredo helped work on this, so I know it's a solid plan. And you can see it will provide water supply to add to the system, reused treated wastewater that can be safely used back in the system. That first phase of this project is scheduled, and it coincides with that break point we talked about where the city of Laredo is going to need additional supplemental supply. So that phase one of this project would start in 2040, provide 3 MGD initially, and then by the year 2060, a second phase would be available, and that would provide another 6 MGD. It is cost effective to look at reuse in these reclaimed water projects, although there's not enough there to meet in total the supplemental or emergency goals. They are a excellent source of water that can be made available to the city in the future at a very low cost that we'll look at in just a minute. All right, next slide, please. We also looked, we had Kirk Kennedy, who's very familiar with the Rio Grande, look at additional water supply, surface water from water rights that could be made available in the Rio Grande. Kirk Kennedy did not find any additional surface water supplies that would be readily available on the Rio Grande in terms of tributaries or that type of thing. So based on our initial discussions, and this will be in the report, additional surface water development in the Rio Grande is expected to be limited, but the acquisition of future water rights is a recommendation that the city is currently following and should continue to follow. Next slide. All right, we're going to shift gears just a little bit and look at these alternatives in a little bit different way. Here is one aspect of how we rank or rank the alternatives. We're looking at the cost. We're looking at how much water supply can be made available from that alternative and for how many days. So also we're looking at the number of miles that the project is located, number of miles away from the city of Laredo's water system. Okay, if we look on the left side, there is the Lake Casablanca. Option one is no dredging. Remember, Tom talked about the need to dredge. That adds substantial cost. The amount of supply is very limited. And even though it's only 5 miles away from the city system, it would only provide for about 6 days. That 5.84 is the number of days calculated that the supply from Lake Casablanca could be made available to meet emergency goals. So that 33.5 MGD demand. So it's very limited in the number of days. And as a result, the cost, the unit cost is high. It's 140 for the option one without the dredging, and then jumps up another almost $30 if we do the dredging to 187. Looking at the groundwater projects we just went through, the first bars are the distance from the city system. The next bar gives an indication of what would it cost to use supplies from that source at the 33.5 MGD goal. And you see those cost numbers fairly consistent for Wave and Dimmitt County. Valverde County, you go out 150 miles, you're going to add some significant cost. One other factor that we would be looking at and the city would be considering is that the North Webb County could provide the emergency supply goal for 243 days, as we mentioned earlier. But the two Dimmitt and Valverde County projects would be year-round able to provide for the emergency supply goal for the city. All right, we can answer questions about that one later. Next slide. I did want to put in, this slide is the same slide, except I've inserted the the South Laredo reuse project, give you an idea of the phase 1 cost. It's close to the system. That's the 8.7 miles of piping that would be needed. But the cost, particularly that first phase cost, is very low at just under $2 a thousand. And then the phase 2 cost is just over $5 a gallon. So that gives you a perspective of supply amount, the ability to meet the emergency goal in terms of the number of days, and then an estimate of unit cost for doing that. So those will be discussed in more detail in the report that will be provided to the city. Okay, next slide. We are also going to look at other things than just cost, and this is our evaluation criteria table, and you can see we talked about the primary set of water supply alternatives. Those they're shown there. But we also looked at a number of other potential alternatives in some detail. Not as much information was available on those secondary alternatives. We're looking at all of at a number of different issues: environmental concern issues, water rights, property acquisition requirements, contracts, etc., and certainly acceptability of those water supply alternatives to the public. We'll be working with the city probably next week and going through these and confirming that the weighting factors and the outcomes of the criteria rankings are good, are reliable, are sound, reasonable. And again, this will be what will help us identify for the city the alternatives that make the most sense in terms of meeting both the supplemental water supply goal as well as the emergency supply goal. All right, I think that may be the end of my group, and I'll turn it over now to Lisa Latu to talk about the next steps. Lisa?
Great. Thank you, Tom, and everyone for sharing all that great and detailed information about the City of Laredo system and what we're looking at for the future. Again, the Laredo Utility Department has been developing and implementing projects for many, many years, replacing old infrastructure and bringing the water and wastewater service to new development. The next part of the project that we're working on now is going to be prioritizing and scheduling all of these projects, to sort through the projects that are already known, to look at new projects that are being anticipated, to imagine the future needs using that water model, and also looking at this future water supply source and emergency sources. I'll be assigning a deadline and a cost for every project and judging the impacts and the benefits of the projects against the costs so that we can pick the best projects for the best price and lay out a plan for the next 20 years. And that's really important because we want to be able to pursue all of the financing options that we have, loans and grants and partnerships. We want to keep improving the system today and prepare for the system that we'll need as we grow. The next slide, please. So that sort of plan is essentially what a capital improvement plan is. It's a path for implementing projects against our goals. Again, going through the projects that we already know about, looking at new projects that occur to us or that we see as we build out the system for the future. Reviewing the comprehensive plan and the trajectory of growth and development to try to anticipate and keep up. And of course, keeping track of all of the costs and spend rates and deadlines for projects. The next slide shows a little bit of the dollars that we're looking at already. And this is just 5 years worth of projects that are already planned. Almost $126 million of total investment, split about $69 million for supply and treatment of the water, and $57 million for moving it around from place to place within the city. The next slide shows some of the projects that we already know about or are thinking about. And hopefully there's one that you recognize from your neighborhood. Of course, the El Pico treatment plant, the Lion Street booster station, which I think maybe has started work already. Some repair and replacement lines, particularly in the downtown. The project that Charles was talking about, an outer loop project to help bring water around the city to some of the new development. And then lots of a lot of the local or neighborhood plants always need work. So Cuatro Vientos, Northwest, I think the water tower there is called La Bota. In the East Corridor area, the Del Mar area, and the airport area. Those are some of the ones that we have identified already. And I've been excited to see questions already in the chat. I think we're asking you to still hold on to those questions or put them into the chat so that you don't forget. And I'm turning it back over to Jean, I think, who will bring up the wastewater portion of the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And about this time is at a real town hall, at a live one, we would stretch our legs out and take potty break. This for the Super Bowl, we'd have some great commercials for you. But what we're going to do now is just roll right into the wastewater side, and I'm going to introduce to you Hector Pena with the Ardura team, and Hector is going to be covering the wastewater master plan that started in January of this year. City Council selected his group, Ardura, and they have been trailing right behind the water guys and working side by side, collaborating. There are pieces that tie together, and he will cover those through his presentation. So without further ado, Hector Pena, if you can, take over.
Thank you, Gene, and good evening, everyone. Again, I'm Hector Pena. I'm with Ardura, and like Gene said, we're leading the wastewater master plan efforts for the city. So I'll be providing an overview of the integrated wastewater master plan, a review of our progress to date, and also an overview of the city's existing wastewater system before I pass it on to Ignacio from our team. So the objectives of the integrated wastewater master plan are, as listed on the screen, are: one, we're evaluating the capacity of the existing wastewater collection system under current conditions and population, but also for future projected growth scenarios, which go through 2070. Second, we're developing sustainable infrastructure for long-term growth. We're going to develop alternatives that will identify opportunities and plan infrastructure that's going to serve the city's long-term development. And third, we're providing the city with a roadmap for resilient long-term water treatment. So we're going to provide a capital improvement program, or a CIP, as has been mentioned here, for the next 50 years that the city can implement for a reliable wastewater collection system to serve the anticipated future population. So just as a background of the wastewater collection process, here's a graphic that shows what happens after homes and businesses flush. I guess the water exits homes and businesses from the drains and toilets, and where that goes. So that if you look at the middle of the screen here, you've got homes and businesses shown here, and then got the wastewater collection system represented here with the green pipes. The collection system consists of I'll explain this in a minute, but it consists of gravity and force main pipes, manholes, and lift stations, which are represented here by those pumps here labeled as lift station, and then all that the collection system send the dirty water into the wastewater treatment plants to be treated, and after treatment, of course, the water can be either safely released back into the river, or as shown here with the purple pipe, it can be reused as non-potable water. So, next slide. So here on the right side of the screen, we have a map showing the city's actual wastewater system. The city's collection system is made up of approximately 900 miles of sewer lines. Most of these sewer lines are gravity lines, but there are also some force mains. So the gravity lines are shown here on green. There's also force mains are also shown, but it's a bit harder to see because they're significantly less force mains, but they're shown here, shown in red. And to help visualize the amount of pipe, if the map doesn't do that already here with all these green lines, if we were to line up the 900 miles of pipes that make up the collection system, it would be equivalent to the distance from Laredo to Kansas City, Missouri. So again, just throwing that fact out there, just to put in perspective how complex the system is and how much pipe the city constantly maintains that we may not be aware of in order to keep the system functioning. So yeah, this 900 miles of pipe range from sizes from all the way down from 4 inches all the way to 54 inches. And again, like I said, they collect the wastewater system from every single home and business in the city. And then the wastewater travels mostly downhill by gravity until, as shown in this graphic, they reach a low point in the system where they have to, a lift station has to be installed in order to pump or lift the wastewater so that it can continue flowing downhill again, so it can make its way into one of the wastewater treatment plants. So there are 71 of these lift stations throughout the city. If we looked at the map on the previous slides, they're represented by the red dots. There are also, shown in this graphic, there are 13,000 manholes in the system that connect all of these pipes or all these green lines that were shown on the previous map. And finally, there are 6 wastewater treatment plants that the city owns and operates. There were, if we went a couple of slides back, we looked at the map that we had there on the right, we'll see that they were right there, they're circled in blue. So that's, I'm sorry, my screen turned black here, so I can't see anything. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Technical issues here, but anyways, again, those are the 6 wastewater treatment plants, and combined, these 6 water treatment plants have a capacity of 35 MGD or 35 million gallons per day, and but they actually treat an average daily flow of 19 MGD. All right. So here we have a graphic that shows I guess, a typical treatment process that the city uses in most of their plants. The first component here on the left side, it's the influent lift station. This is where the wastewater from the collection system that I just described enters the plant and discharges into this wet well or tank that sits below ground. From there, it is pumped, wastewater is pumped into the first process, which is called the pre-treatment. That consists of the screening and the grit removal, shown here as the second and third processes here on this graphic. Screens are there to capture and remove large objects such as wipes and plastics, and the grit removal is there to remove finer materials such as sand and gravel. So all of these solids, both the larger objects and the finer material, are removed and taken to a landfill for disposal. So the next step in the process, shown here in green, is called the secondary or biological treatment. Here's labeled as the aeration basin. So here, activated sludge, which are the good microorganisms, are introduced, as well as air, as you can see on the graphic here. We can see some bubbles there. So air in the form of bubbles is pumped into it as well to feed these microorganisms, to help them reproduce them, keep them alive, and eat the pollutants in order to achieve biodegradation. Then the next step here is a final or secondary clarifier. Now these are typically they're circular tanks that have a mechanism inside them rotating slowly, which help the solids settle to the bottom of the tank, and from there they're removed. The solids that settle at the bottom, they're removed for processing. And the last step of the treatment process is disinfection, which is here shown on the right side. This can be accomplished using either chlorine, ozone, or UV light. Now, after disinfection, the water, as I mentioned earlier, can be safely either released back into the river, reused for plant operations, or sold as non-potable water for irrigation or industrial usage. So here we have aerial images of the 6 wastewater treatment plants that the city owns and operates. On the top left, we've got Zacate, which is by the International Bridge number 2. And we got to the right of it, we've got South Laredo, which is behind the Santa Fe subdivision, over by Zapata Highway. And then we've got North Laredo on the right side, which is in Shiloh, close to Loop 20. Bottom left, we've got Unitech, which is mile marker 13, serving an industrial area. Then we've got Laredo, Colombia, which also serves an industrial area by the Laredo, Colombia International Bridge. And finally, on the bottom right, we've got Peñitas, which is also located in Mines Road. All right, so here, I guess earlier I talked about the combined design capacities and average flows for the 6 wastewater treatment plants. So here we have the 50-year projections to determine what capacity is going to be needed by 2070, which is a long-term scenario. On the left side of the graph for 2020, we have the current approximate population in blue, which is around 300,000 currently. So, and then as mentioned earlier, the average daily flow, which is shown here in the yellow or green color, is around 19 MGD. And then the combined capacity of 35 MGD for the 6 plants. Then on the right side, we have long-term projections. And as LAN said earlier on their presentation, the population for the city of Laredo is estimated to be over 600,000 by 2070. So as the population increases, the wastewater that's generated will also increase, right? So it's estimated that the average daily flow into the wastewater treatment plants is going to be around 46 MGD. So in order to figure out what the treatment capacity would be required by 2070, we look at the TCEQ rules, which state that whenever a wastewater treatment plant reaches 75% capacity for 3 straight months, then you start planning for expansion. So following that rule, we determined that we're going to need approximately 61 MGD of treatment capacity to treat those additional 26 MGD in 2070. So just to visualize this in terms of cost, what will be the cost to provide this additional capacity? We're using an estimate of $8 to $10 per gallon of treatment capacity, and therefore, to add 26 MGD, we're looking at the cost being between $208 to $260 million in treatment capacity. So again, this is, we say treatment capacity alone, just to highlight that this doesn't include the collection system. Again, these are just rough numbers. We're early on in our study here for our wastewater master plan, but we'll just provide an idea of what the cost may be. Next slide, please. So this diagram here shows our approach of how we're accomplishing the objectives that I mentioned in the first slide here, and also shows where we are in the process. So I cover the initial steps of the wastewater master plan highlighted here in orange. The first step, I covered part of the information that was collected from the city for the existing collection system and their treatment facilities. And then I touched at a high level of how we review the design criteria and the level of service for the existing facility. So below those steps highlighted here in orange, we have got a couple of steps here in parallel, which is where we currently are in the process. And Nacho Hinojosa from our Laredo office here will touch on that and as well as on the next steps of the wastewater master plan. So I'll pass it on to Ignacio.
Thank you, Hector. Quick disclaimer, if you guys see me moving out just around, I'm not in trouble. Nothing's happening. It's just me pretending I'm in a live town hall meeting, right? I'm still getting used to this virtual presentation, even 1 year in. So
We're dodging
as Hector,
last time, sorry.
so as Hector mentioned, I'll be going over what we're currently doing as part of the wastewater master plan. And we're sort of in a place where we're running 2 parallel trains, which is the wastewater flow projections. And we're also doing a wastewater collection system analysis and asset management component of this wastewater master plan. In addition to that, I'll also be covering or touching base on the existing capital improvement plan of the wastewater site for the city of Laredo. So for the flow determination or the flow projections, we want to accomplish 3 things, right? We first want to set a baseline condition or existing flow condition. So 2020 base flows, what we flush, what we use, what drains down our faucets from our houses and our businesses. And then once we set that, we want to project that flow over 5 planning horizons. So for 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060, and 2070. So every decade until we reach the 50-year mark. And then we want to use those flow projections to develop a 50-year plan that has alternatives and scenarios and a capital improvement plan attached to those alternatives and scenarios of how the city will build out to accommodate for the expansion of the city. So as I mentioned, the first thing we want to accomplish, or we accomplished, was the existing flow estimation, right, for the baseline condition. So we first went in and then we got with the city and we identified the existing sewer sheds and subbasins. So what is a sewer shed? The sewer sheds are represented. We have 3 major ones here in Laredo, and they're represented in the different areas in different colors here on the right side of your screen. The 3 main ones are the Zacate Creek, the North Laredo, and the South Laredo sewer sheds. And in the north of the city, sort of isolated, we have the Laredo Colombia sewer shed, the Penitas, and the Unitech Industrial Park sewer sheds. So what does a sewer shed mean? So for example, if you live in the Mines Road area and you flush your toilet, you take a shower, all that wastewater will travel all the way to El Azteca, or right next to El Azteca, where Zacate Creek wastewater treatment plant is, and then the wastewater flow will be treated there, and then it'll then go as effluent water, clean water into the river, to the Rio Grande. Another example, if you live east of the airport or by the lakeside area, then your wastewater actually travels all the way down to the South Laredo wastewater treatment plant there in South Zapata Highway. So just to give you an idea of what a sewer shed is, and the magnitude of those, how big they can be. All right. Once we identified that, then we calculate something called the average daily dry weather flow, assuming no rain. And why we assume no rain is because when we have rain events, large rain events, we have something called inflow and infiltration. And what that is the rainwater infiltrates the manholes, the lift stations, the pipes. So we don't want to account for that because for one, it doesn't rain a lot here in Laredo. So it wouldn't give us a true picture of what we see every day, right? What is the average every day? So that said, we calculated that average daily dry weather flow for the entire city by sewer shed basin and per capita. So for every 100 residents. And then we proceeded to calculate a GPCD, which is gallon per capita per day for the 3 main service areas. And that gave us a good idea, a good picture of where we're at today with the flows, right? So about 19 MGD. We essentially confirmed the average daily flow. And now for the flow projections or the future flows, we're currently working with our team and the city on determining these. But I'll take you through some of the considerations that we'll do, that we'll take into account. We'll essentially use a future land use within the city limits. So those are areas that are not developed within the city yet, but they're already attributed either to light manufacturing, business, residential, multi-use. So each of those lots already have an intended use, and that goes with an estimated flow, right? And then we'll carry that out through the ETJ The ETJ is an extraterritorial jurisdiction, which is area that hasn't been annexed by the city. It's unincorporated, but eventually the city will end up growing that in that direction, right? And it's everything represented in green in the graphic on your right side. And then we'll also take into account population projections from the Region M master plan, like Charles mentioned, like Hector mentioned, and other planning reports like the Metropolitan Transportation Plan and major infrastructure projects that the city has ongoing, like the Hachar Ruthinger Road, the Outer Loop, which is planned for the future, the South Laredo Sports Complex. So sort of these catalytic projects that'll shape how the city grows and impact it, right? So we got to make sure that we give the city a plan that goes along with those projects and supports that infrastructure. So again, once we go through those projections, we will do them planning horizons every decade until we get to 2070. And as a result, we'll develop alternative scenarios for the ultimate build out and a capital improvement plan to go along with that. So the other parallel train is a wastewater collection system analysis and asset management. And what we want to get out of this, the main things is we want to summarize the current assets and life expectancy of the wastewater system. Then we want to develop renewal costs for the current assets and use these costs to develop a long-term CIP for renewal of the system, right? So not the future improvements, but what we're going to do with the assets that we have right now, right? The pipe on the ground. How do we renew and have an up-to-date system? So as part of the wastewater collection analysis, one of the many iterations that we'll look into, we're giving you a snapshot here in this slide right here, and I'll walk you through it. This example shows us the gravity sewer mains from 6 inches to 24 inches. And we've sort of put them in two different scenarios, right? One by installation area and other by material type. So first I'll cover the installation area. And everything here, the pipe from 6 inches to 24 inches has been labeled from everything installed before 1980, or then we take it to 1980s, installed in the 1990s, so on and so forth, until we get to the 2020s. So the main takeaway here is that the 45% of our system was installed in the 80s or before. A lot of us in this call weren't even born when most of the system, or almost half of the system, was installed, right? So we have an aging system. It's fair to say that we have an aging system. As far as the material type, on the other hand, we see it broken down into two main categories. One, PVC, and the other one is vertified clay pipe, or VCP, and other. Main takeaway here is most of our system is PVC. That's industry standard for wastewater pipe, right? Green PVC pipe is wastewater pipe. And then in the older parts of Laredo, in your downtown, District 8, District 3, District 4, you may see some areas where we still have vertified clay pipe or other types of pipe. And that will be sooner rather than later, will likely be renewed and will be replaced by PVC pipe. And why do we use PVC pipe? Just for the simple fact that wastewater is highly corrosive, and PVC sort of stands the test of time compared to other materials. So once, as we go through the analysis, right, then we'll develop an asset management plan for the city. And I'll give you an example of what that asset management will include, right? And as Hector mentioned earlier, if we were to line up all the wastewater pipe, the 900 miles, it'll take us from Laredo to Kansas City, right? And what we're saying here is that 30% of our collection, or what we have found is that 30% of our collection system has a life expectancy of 10 years or less. To put things in perspective, that's like a distance from here to Austin, right? And that need will grow from Laredo to Waco, or even beyond that, till 2070. So to counteract that, what we would theoretically recommend once we're done with this exercise is to implement something like a renewal of a 1% of the system every year, so that by 2070 we have a system with a life expectancy of 10 years or more, right? So the money that would be attributed for renewal is no longer needed and could be invested in other infrastructure that may be in need at that time. So this is just an example of what asset management looks like, right? And what we would be recommending to the city. On the other hand, and this slide right here, this is more just to give a snapshot of what our wastewater collection system maintenance crews go through. When they do the work orders, right? And some of you may be familiar with work orders at your jobs, but what the crews would see on the wastewater collection system side is when we call 311 and we have odor complaints. There's a sewer pipe break next to my house. There's sewer backups. Lift station is overflowing. The pumps are down. So when that happens, there's a work order inputted into the system, and a crew has to go out there. Some work orders are as fast as 30 minutes. Some take days. But for this exercise, I chose an arbitrary amount of 2 hours per work order, right? Just to give you an idea of what our crews, the time they spend on work orders alone, not including their daily tasks and other projects that the city has ongoing. So on a weekly basis, they spend about 53 hours per week. Monthly basis, 255 hours and 2,900 hours per year. Just again, this is an arbitrary amount. 2 hours per work order is a good, paints a good picture, right? And like I said in the previous town hall meeting, kudos to not only the wastewater collection system, but during the freeze that we had in February, the water distribution and the water treatment crews were working round the clock to make sure that they reestablish services and fix, I think, the 270 pipe breaks that we had citywide, right, to keep water flowing into our houses. So big thanks to Arturo and Mike's staff there at the utilities department for that. So with all that said, like I said, I was going to touch base on the wastewater CIP. This is money allocated for capital improvement projects, so big projects for the city of Laredo wastewater system. So currently the city has $64 million approximately allocated for wastewater treatment projects, $41 million for collection system projects, with a total investment of $105 million approximately. So now the CIP plan is what the city has, right? It's what has been allocated for the next 4 years. And we're going to be taking a look at that and possibly modifying that as we go through this process to ensure that the money is being invested where it's needed as the city grows, right? And what is a CIP? I think Lisa touched on the CIP projects on the water side earlier today, or earlier in this presentation. But an example on the wastewater side, a couple of the projects that were recently completed were the South Laredo wastewater treatment plant expansion that was completed last year. That was a total cost of $21 million. And then in 2019, the Unitech wastewater treatment plant improvements were completed, and that was approximately $2 million. Right now, we have in construction, we have a few, the Eastern Chacon Interceptor there on Jaime Zapata Memorial Highway. It's a big project, big interceptor project, $4 million. The Zacate Line rehab from Canal Street down to Chacon Creek. The Florida Street improvements right there in front of RIA's office in front of City Hall. And the Unitech Phase 1 expansion, which is also ongoing on the treatment side with an estimated cost of $4 million. And with that, I completed going over what we're currently doing for the wastewater master plan. And the next steps will be to take all the information that we collected, the flow projections, the wastewater collection system analysis, the asset management, input them into the model, update the model, evaluate the alternatives that we come up with, and then provide an integrated CIP and a master plan report for the city to use for the next 50 years.
Okay, Nacho, thank you so much for that, for all that information. And you know, we're reaching this point of our Q&A, but before I do that, I wanted to take a minute to introduce the Honorable Council Member, Dr. Marte Martinez, who has joined us. He's infinitely familiar with these programs and this presentation, but I wanted him to say a few words because I know that he feels that this is a very, very important project for the city of Laredo. So, Council Member, if you can't open your mic and if you want to turn on your camera and say hello to everyone.
Well, I got bad reception right now, but I can open the mic. Thank you, Council Member, very much for those words. You know, one of the first things that I did when I first got to council is started looking at the basic necessities of the community of Laredo, and first and foremost was, of course, water and wastewater. We realized going in while I was running and I started looking at our infrastructure needs, and I realized that they were sorely lacking. And because of that, it put us at risk, in certain areas at risk, specifically downtown and some of the older areas with pipes 60, 70, 80 years old, and no real plan going forward. Or at least if there was a plan, we weren't sticking to that plan. And so I decided early on that the most important thing we could do is to stabilize the utilities department, specifically going forward, and make sure that our rates were looked at, our infrastructure was looked at, the way we were treating our water was looked at, and then realizing that the growth of our community is not really linear. It looks like it's exponential here over the last 20 years. We really had to get a handle on it. And so I made the motion to create these water and wastewater master plans. And we couldn't have done it in any sooner or better timing, because we realized quite quickly how many problems we were having. This snowvid, this storm, this ice storm that we had revealed significant issues. And before that, we had a water boil notice that had also showed us significant issues. And so I think this is very important. But, you know, when I took the initiative to try to fix some of these problems, it required some funds. And because of that, there was a rate increase that had to happen in order to be able to stabilize all our infrastructure. But one of the concerns that I had is that although this rate study had been done previous to my arrival, I didn't feel that engagement had really gone out or gone far enough towards the community. And there was a lot of people that were outraged, a lot of ratepayers that were outraged by the fact that these things needed to happen. And so the goal in creating the master plans was to make sure that we included community involvement so that people would understand really the ramifications of not acting and the ramifications of not protecting our investments, our infrastructure, and replacing our infrastructure that is really aging. So I'm glad to see that there are members of the community here present and excited about the future of Laredo, the growth that we see in Laredo. And that understand or are starting to get a true explanation as to why these things take money and what we must do going forward to ensure that our city and our citizens and our ratepayers, whenever they flush the toilet, it goes, and whenever they turn on the faucet, there's water. But that comes with planning, and it comes with a cost. But I wanted everybody to understand that. I wanted everybody to have a time to engage and to speak their mind and so we could hear them. So that's all I have to say for now, Council Member. And thank you very much for all this hard work and all this information that we're getting and we're giving to the ratepayers and the constituents of Laredo, Texas.
Thank you again, Council Member. And yes, we're doing our very best to get as much information out to the community and also to take in that input. And so, you know, we've left some time available in this webinar for a Q&A. And I know we have some attendees. I know we have folks watching on Facebook Live, both on the Laredo Water feed and the City of Laredo and Celebrate Laredo. So if you have questions, now's a good time to ask. I know there's been some that we were holding on to that maybe the general public would like to hear the answers to. But if any of the folks who are in attendance would like to have their microphone open and speak, we'll be happy to do that as well. So one of the questions that was asked and that we want the general public to hear is, what is the dredging in relation to the lake, to Lake Casablanca? There's a component in there that may require dredging of Lake Casablanca. We wanted to have that question answered. Maybe Tom Ray, Tom Mounts, could you guys take that question?
Yes, Gene, I can handle that. There are several methodologies that can be used to dredge the lake. We talked about dredging because we estimate that there's probably at least 10 feet of sediment that's accumulated over the last 70 years since the lake was built. And that's additional capacity that could be returned. The dredging, that you can do it mechanically, sticking a crane on a barge, but that's usually done for very small amounts. When we're looking at several thousand acre feet of sediment that needs to be removed, that's typically done through a hydraulic dredge where they stick a pump down and pump it out. And that becomes very expensive because you have to have, it takes permitting from the state to do it. It takes sufficient land, which may be available there in Casablanca in the northeast side, but all of that has to come together, and that's why it typically runs about $6 to $8 per cubic yard to get it out. And so for that many acre feet, you would be looking at on the order of $5 to $6 million, and probably 2 to 5 years to get it all down if you tried to remove all of the sediment that's accumulated.
Thank you, Tom. And I know the other question that was asked somewhere in that area of alternative sources was a definition, a good definition of brackish water. And I know we put it in the chat for those who were attending the webinar. But I'd like the general public to know what brackish water is, since we do have some in the area that we are considering as an alternative source, but may not fit our needs. So Tom or Charles, somebody want to handle that one?
Yes, Gene, brackish water is essentially salty water. If you want to look at a very simple analysis of it, it has so many dissolved solids, including salt and different ions that are dissolved in the water, that it gives it a taste and a quality that is not acceptable for drinking water. You couldn't use brackish water directly. You would have to impose some sort of treatment to remove some of those dissolved minerals, the dissolved salts, and that process is expensive. The demineralization is expensive. It involves typically reverse osmosis or those types of processes. City's familiar with that. They have been involved with an RO plant with some brackish groundwater, and certainly it's an expensive and challenging maintenance as well to keep those kind of plants in operation. Plus you have a disposal problem with the concentrate that comes from that type of treatment. Arturo can probably educate better than I can, but that's my take on it.
Thank you, Tom. Another question that's been asked on the wastewater side is, if the 19 million gallons a day in treatment or recycling, how much of that would be available to the city in the future for reuse? Nacho or Hector, you want to, or Chris?
Yes, it's Chris. So I essentially reuse is available by the customers we can bring the water to. So we have that as a full source, and it really depends on the customers are, and we will love to reuse if we could to help solve a non-potable water need, but also help us on the distribution side of the effluent. So as much as we can take to customers who can use it, to do that. So that's the short answer.
Is it a 1-to-1, Chris, for every 1 gallon treated the wastewater? Do you get 1 gallon out on the other side, or is there a loss somewhere in between?
There is a little bit of loss because you have a treatment side on that, but when we have effluent, we can use that like a water source to handle non-potable sources. So from that side, it is a 1-to-1 off the total demand, but it really depends on where that use is and then how hard it is to get it to that customer.
Got it. Any concerns with using that water? Any environmental concerns? I think that was any possible damages to the city or land from using that water?
On that. There are 2 types of reuse in Texas, type 1, type 2, just by definition. Both of them are used extensively. Typical type 1 may be used for irrigation in a esplanade or a golf course. Type 2 is a little more stringent, but same types of use. We use it for amenity ponds, a lot of other sources that can be used for that, or to feed an industrial complex or somebody that would like that quality of water. So all valid options. And again, best thing I'll say is let's find the source somebody can use it, and then that will be the best economic use of that water.
Outstanding. Any additional uses for wastewater? I know that there was been a discussion in the chat, and I'd like for the general public to know about potential biosolids. I know the council member has mentioned a project that they're working on, and the possible uses of some of the biosolids.
I'll let the council know.
Yeah, Chris, let me tell you, we also, this is Ria Sulmia with the City Manager's Office. We also just started a solid waste master plan because all the sludge now go to landfill. So part of that master plan will look at the composting, biosolids, even the yard waste, we take it to come up with different, because landfill is very valuable space and most of this material can be reused. And so we'll probably within 6 to 8 months bring that master plan to City Council also and get direction from. But biosolids and composting definitely, and city recently purchased another landfill, so we have plenty of land to do composting at this moment. And Chris, go ahead.
And if I may, council member, one of the commitments that we have, as far as I'm concerned from council, is expanding our use of biosolids as well as expanding the use of composting and recycling. When we made the investment, this very large investment that was necessary for the community to expand our solid waste capacity, we realized that there was an opportunity to look at these other sources, not just as landfill, but also as revenue streams, so that we can find ways of decreasing what the ratepayer has to pay going forward. And so because it helps us in the long run, because there's less material going to the landfill, which right now all this sludge goes there. But then on top of that, we can also use them to fund some of these operations with the goal of trying to mitigate some of the increases in rates that happen over time. So I just wanted to add that.
Excellent point, council member. Any other questions? I think we've answered all the ones that were in the chat, and I would take a look at a few in the feeds. I think there was one question about whether we could do this in 30 minutes. There's a lot of information that both the consultant teams are putting together. The system is very large. It has a lot of needs. And so unfortunately, it's not something we could do in 30 minutes, although we wish we could. So, but again, any other questions from the folks watching us on Facebook or anybody who's in the webinar? I can open up your mic if you'd like. Okay. Mr. Gonzalez, I'm going to open up your mic, okay? Go ahead, Mr. Gonzalez. The floor is yours.
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, I just had a quick question. All of this sounds really great theoretically, and it sounds really exciting. I definitely am very passionate about this city, and I do want it to get better. But my question is, in the bottom line, what is this going to cost the people of Laredo, and when does that cost come, and how does it come? Is it a cost that we'll see in 20 years, and if so, will we see it in our water bill, or are we seeing it in our taxes, and by how much?
I'll let the brave soul who wants to take that question take it. So
I'll take that question, Council Member. This is Council Member Martinez. Yes, ultimately, over the course of time, it does cost more to provide a service. And so although we're looking at trying to mitigate that through proper planning, there is ultimately some source, we have to pay for it somehow. But here's what happens. So previously, when we didn't invest based on a plan, it made us create expenses that were unnecessary. Some of the treatment plans, certain things that we're now paying for the sins of our forefathers, if you will. By laying this foundation of a master plan and by being very diligent in how we invest our money going forward, the goal is to decrease the rate at which that increase of or that increased rate is going to happen. Ultimately, the cost of chemicals goes up. The cost of pipe goes up, the cost of construction goes up, the cost of asphalt to repair these things goes up. So products in general, you see that there's an increase. And so purchasing power, as inflation goes up, purchasing power goes down as well. And so we're working with real economic or macroeconomic issues on top of the micro scale, which is us trying to deliver a product at the lowest rate possible for the consumer, for our ratepayers. So the short answer is yes, unfortunately, there will be an increase. Now, when that will happen, I can't tell you. That's why we're looking for community engagement. I will say this, and I'll be very blunt. When we increased the rates here recently, we were only trying to catch up for something that had happened over the last 15 to 20 years. It wasn't even getting us into a position, or it was at least starting to get us into a position where we can make investments going forward. That's the scary part of all this, that for many years, because people were concerned about the increase in rates and whether people were going to get elected or not elected, people just chose to kick this can down the road. I think it was Councilmember Bermudez who last increased the rates that got us at least to where we are right now and allowed us to survive. And so these are real problems. And yes, there will be an increase. I can't tell you when. That's what we hope that this master plan and the rate studies that are involved with this will tell us. But we do want the public to know that this is happening. We continue to grow and expand. That's why we're doing certain things such as infill development. That's why we're trying to work with certain companies to try to, as we're building new developments, we're actually building them to greater capacity so that going forward, we don't expend as much. And additionally, we're trying to build up and not out so that there is less pipe that's being utilized, because although we have to catch up to what's happened the previous 30, 40, 50, 70 years, what we don't want is to expand or expound upon the problem by continuing to extend laterally forever, because every time we do that, we have to then 30 years from now, 50 years from now, replace that pipe, and we will never be able to catch up. And so there are certain things that we're doing, infill development, going up instead of out as far as development, mixed use, those sorts of things in our planning process, and it all blends together. So we hope that we'll have a very good plan and that the public will be very aware of what we're doing. But yes, sir, ultimately you will see an increase in some point, maybe 5 years, 10 years. I just can't tell you. And you'll see that in your water bill, because this is a ratepayer issue, not a tax issue. So this is because the City of Laredo Utilities Department is its own enterprise fund, which is different than taxes. So I hope I answered your question, Mr. Gonzalez.
thank you, Council Member. Any other questions? Anyone else want to ask a question in the general public and Facebook? We're monitoring a couple streams. I think we're good. We don't have any questions out there. Anybody here at the webinar? Okay. Gustavo, if you'll put back on the screen our future town halls. We have one more in the series of virtual town halls. The next town hall would be April 28th. And you can follow us there at laredowater.org. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. We also can go to the website, laredowater.org. You can take a survey there. As soon as you take that survey, you'll be entered in to win one of 10 4K UHD smart TVs. The survey is extremely important. It asks a lot of questions about everything from rates to water quality to service. So it's important information that the utilities department, the city of Laredo needs in helping make these good decisions. And so we appreciate all of you who have come here tonight to be part of this. All of you who have joined us on Facebook. And again, we encourage you to take the survey, share it with your friends, come back to the town hall on the 28th. There'll be future town halls as we get ready to put out the information of the master plan as it is being compiled, and hopefully sometime in late fall, be able to present a full master plan for adoption by the city, probably sometime in fourth quarter, tentatively, as we get this wrapped up. So again, thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. Teams, thank you so much for all the information you've presented. We look forward to doing this again next week. And then potentially as we get this pandemic in our rearview mirror, we might be able to have some live town halls as well, so we can share more information with you in a more timely fashion, since 2 hours is a long time. And we do appreciate you sticking with us this long. So again, thank you, everyone. Have a great night. We look forward to seeing you all at the next town hall.